Cashier, why not?
Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the Omnivore Reader Book Tag, which I've been tagged to do by and written by the book. The original tag is by Emma at A Cup of Books. The idea is that you pick 4 genres or subgenres that you like to read, and you try and pick as widely as possible, and then you answer 3 questions for each of those genres. So what are my 4 genres?
The classics: Austen, Dickens, Thackeray, Eliot, and Julia Quinn. Just kidding. The last one is of course still set in the Regency era, just like Jane Austen's novels, but it is historical fiction romance.
Classics. What is my favourite? You can probably see I've got a stack of books here all ready to go. My favourite one is Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is a book that was published 6 months after Jane Austen's death. So that was published in 1817 and follows the life of Anne Elliot. And at the stage that we meet her, we already know that Anne, well, we know because it's a classic, so I'm hoping that I don't spoil this for people, but Anne Elliot is Jane Austen's first female character or heroine who is in her 20s or 27. So she's the oldest female character that Jane Austen has written. And if you remember in Pride and Prejudice, if you've read Pride and Prejudice, Charlotte is 27 as well, and all the other girls are much younger than her and have their, really good prospects for marriage. Whereas Charlotte at 27 is considered to be well beyond the age of being able to snag an eligible bachelor. So I really like it for that reason. You've got Anne Elliot as a character who in her late teens very much believed or relied on the views of other people. So she was, expecting other people to steer her right. Unfortunately for Anne, she has got 2 very selfish, very self-absorbed and ridiculous people in her family, those being her father and her sister, who squander their entire wealth on frivolous stuff and appearances, and this results in the start of the book where they have to rent out their home and they rent it out to someone who is related to a man that they persuaded Anne not to marry in her late teens. So she did have a marriage proposal and they went, no, this guy is just not good enough. He hasn't got the rank or the wealth, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And lo and behold, he comes back several years later and he is like the most eligible bachelor in society. So, poor Anne. Next up is, what book are you currently reading or have you recently finished? So I didn't actually bring the book up, so I don't know why I'm stretching here. It's Adam Bede, which I read with Tori at Hufflepuff Discovery. So Adam Bede is written by George Eliot, and I will put a link somewhere up here to the book review that I did. Then what book on your TBR from this genre do you think you'll read next? So either a very ambitious Middlemarch, which is a real chunker, really a tome, or a more conservative Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I have a funny feeling I'm going to go with this one next. Yeah. And then we go on to my next genre. My favourite science fiction novel is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. This is, well, seemingly a young adult novel, but really it's for all ages, young adult upwards. It is a militaristic science fiction novel and is set in a future where we have pretty much a one-child policy across the world. Ender is unique in that he is a third, so he is really looked down upon by his classmates because he is actually from a family of 3. 2 is bad enough, you have to apply to get permission to have a second child. 3 is pretty much unheard of, so he's taunted for that. There is a reason though that his family were allowed to have 3 children, or were pretty much asked to have 3 children, and that is because in the future we are worried about an alien species that are taking over different planets, and we think, well, they're going to come and take over Earth. And before they can do that, we want to have the military capability and thinking power to stop them. And what they decide to do is train up children and teach them to think in a really military strategy sort of way. And with Ender, he is the 3rd because his brother didn't make the cut, and then the second born, the sister, didn't make the cut. And they were confident that maybe, you know, Ender could be the top of his class. But it's really dubious because you see his struggles. You've got a really interesting dynamic in the family, and then you've got the really fascinating science fiction elements of his training. So that really pulled me into science fiction. And that's why it will remain a favourite of mine, purely because it's one of the earliest ones that I remember. Those are the fighter jets flying over. So I'm just going to wait. A science fiction novel that I've read recently is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, and I love that it follows a main character who is from a small tribe in Namibia called the Himba. So Binti is from this close-knit community in the Himba tribe and has to really strike out on her own. So I love that whole independence of thought and her sort of putting her thoughts into action when she decides to join the Intergalactic University. I have done a mini review, which I'll link above. It's a novella, so it's really short. I think it was like 95 pages. But it is part of a trilogy, so the story unfolds in a really fascinating way and pulls in different concepts like having mathematics as a universal language across different species in our galaxy. So highly recommend that one. And then on to what I'm going to be reading next in the science fiction genre. So I have a few science fiction novels that I want to read, but really I'm going to read you the blurb for Embers of War by Gareth L. Powell. It is about the crew of a sentient warship, or former warship, called Trouble Dog. And Trouble Dog was part of a fleet of warships which were actually genetically engineered, because they're sentient, genetically engineered to think like a pack of wolves, so they're actually canine fleet. And I love that thought. It's also about how this sentient ship is struggling through, I guess it's like PTSD, but also her crew are also similarly affected. So it's about the effects of war and also coming together of very different characters and people who had different philosophies and stuff. So I'd love to see how that comes together. Right, so the blurb says, from BSFA award-winning author Gareth L. Powell comes the first in a new epic sci-fi trilogy exploring the legacies of war. The sentient warship Trouble Dog was built for violence, yet following a brutal war she is disgusted by her role in genocide. Stripped of her weaponry and seeking to atone, she joins the House of Reclamation, an organization dedicated to rescuing ships in distress. When a civilian ship goes missing in a disputed system, Trouble Dog and her new crew of loners, captained by Sal Constance, are sent on a rescue mission. Meanwhile, light years away, intelligence officer Ashton Child is tasked with locating the poet Ona Sudak, who was aboard the missing spaceship. What Child doesn't know is that Sudak is not the person she appears to be. A straightforward rescue mission turns into something far more dangerous, as Trouble Dog, Constance, and Child find themselves at the center of a conflict that could engulf the entire galaxy. If she is to save her crew, Trouble Dog is going to have to remember how to fight. So that sounds just brilliant to me. Very much looking forward to that. And I think I saw on Twitter, and I'll look it up and I'll put a little message down below if it's right. I think he tweeted, that's Gareth L. Powell, the author, tweeted to say that this was going to be turned into a TV series. I might be making that up, in which case I'll cut this and you'll never know, but if I'm right, I'll pop it down below. Choosing my favourite fantasy book was quite difficult because I now love epic fantasy, but what really got me into fantasy was actually humour. So I came into this through Discworld, and I loved the comedic fantasy world. I now read very much, Brandon Sanderson, but if I had more Discworld books to revisit again, in fact I'm going to reread them, but if I had more of those to reread, that is really what drew me into the fantasy world. And it was because of the humour and the satire, poking fun at people who have power. You'll very much recognise certain political figures in some of the Discworld books, and even if you didn't recognise particular ones who were current for the time of the writing, you will always find links to people who are currently in power and bureaucracy and all of that. So I very much enjoy that. My favourite book of all of the Discworld books is going to be Thief of Time, and that's because it comes under the thematic chronology for death. If you don't know, Discworld has got several books that you can read chronologically, but also because there are so many different groups of characters that are followed within Discworld, you can follow thematically as well. And a lot of the books that come under the Death series, or chronologically under Death, are the ones that really appeal to me. And I also like Witches and The Night Watch and, the Unseen Academy, all of those. But somehow the ones that have got Death and his daughter Susan Stowe-Hellett, those really just, appeal to me. And with Thief of Time, you come across a new character. His name is Lobsang Lud, and he's been adopted into a monastery of monks, monks of time, or history, monks of history, and their job is to reroute time in Discworld, diverting it away from where it's not needed to where it's more needed. So, for example, how much time would a codfish underwater need? Very little, according to the monks. Who knows, maybe the codfish feels differently, but they then pump that extra time that they've taken away from the codfish out into the cities where everyone's always busy and needs more time. But of course you can't have a story without a twist or without, something about to happen. So that's something, I don't want to ruin the story, but that's something from the blurb as well, tells you that there's going to be a totally accurate clock built. And the consequences of that, the ramifications are huge, and therefore Lutzi and Lobsang Lud go on a mission to correct things. And in the midst of all this, you also have Susan Stowe-Hellett, who I absolutely love. And in fact, I've got because I used to get the calendars for Discworld, I've got a picture that I can show you, so I'll be right back. So, wouldn't this be the perfect governess who could fly you out and teach you how to tell the time by, taking you to one of the biggest clocks in the city, or do whatever she likes? So she is the sort of person who would knock out the monsters under your bed with a poker while your parents are saying that monsters are imaginary. She knows they're real. She knows all the things that are unseen, and she's just really cool. So she comes into the picture, and for the first time you've got a little bit of potential romance for Susan. So really cool book. What am I currently reading from the fantasy genre? Well, that's urban fantasy. I've just recently finished The Last Dragon Standing, which is part of the Heartstriker series from Rachel Aaron. The spin-off series is actually what I started with, and that's called the DFC. Highly recommend those books for a bit of a laugh. Dragons, magic and spirits all reawakened after a meteor strike, and we're starting to get to grips with the ramifications, I'm liking that word today, ramifications of having magic flood back into our worlds. I'm a little bit daunted about my next book for the fantasy genre, and that's because it is 1,248 pages. That's Oathbringer. I have to read this because it had great reviews, and the next book's already out, which is about as long or perhaps even a little bit longer, and that is Rhythm of War. So I need to catch up. I have to catch up with everyone else with the Stormlight archives. There's some amazing discussions that I've seen going on YouTube, and I'm sort of like saving these videos to my watch later list because I'll then be able to enjoy them. But at the moment I'm avoiding loads of discussions because I just, you know, don't want it spoiled for me. But yeah, so that I'm gonna have to do that on a reading month where I'm not reading tons of other books. So yeah. My favourite non-fiction book is called Neger Neger Schornsteinfeger, which if it was translated directly I guess would be Negro Negro Chimney Sweep, something like that. And it's written by Hans Massaquoi, and he talks about how he grew up in Nazi Germany as a black child. And it is absolutely fascinating. I read it while I was living in Germany, and I am going to be getting a copy in English now because my German's gotten really rusty. But it starts off in 1926 Hamburg. So he does tell the story of his parents and how they met and how he came to be. And then he's, you know, suddenly in Nazi Germany with this whole ideology of, you know, Hitler's youth and the consequences for him. It was written in such a good way. It pulls in all of these different historical facts, but it's got a lot of the personal detail because it is his autobiography. It is about his childhood and then as a teenager and a young man, and how he ends up living in the States as well, which, you know, all of the circumstances are just really, you know, fascinating. I'd love to say more, and I better move on. Right, so that is in English. What is it called in English? Let me tell you. Destined to Witness, it's called in English. Destined to Witness, Growing Up Black in Nazi Germany. A recent non-fiction novel that I've read is Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. This is a collection of essays which cover a range of topics, starting with Harlem in the 1940s and then ranging across different media of the time, so films and books. And he pulls in how those shape our view on race and the challenges for someone of colour in the States in particular, but he also touches on European aspects because of his life living in Paris. In the blurb it says, the essays capture the complexity of black life at the dawn of the civil rights movement with effervescent wit and prophetic wisdom. And my next read for non-fiction is going to be part of a non-fiction book club that I'm in, and it is Lessons in Stoicism by John Sellers. And this says it's an enlightening explanation of how Stoic philosophy can help us in our lives. It can put us in control of our feelings, help us in adversity, and guide us in our relationships with others. Sellers is ideally placed to offer these lessons. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. The full title is Lessons in Stoicism, What Ancient Philosophers Teach Us About How to Live. So I like that it's also really compact. The lessons in life are not looking too onerous, but I bet you they're extremely hard to follow, to actually implement and that sort of thing. So I will feed back. And that is my Omnivore reader tag done. I now just need to tag people, and if I don't tag you and you fancy doing this tag, then please go ahead and do it. The people I'm going to tag are Eliza Baum and Beth Ann Brininga Sokola. I hope I said that right. And Janae at Coffee and Copyrights. Thanks so much for joining me, and if you enjoyed the channel then please remember to like and subscribe. Thanks.